our March 22nd, 2010 meeting of the City Council. All please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. No. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So first on the agenda, are there any changes to the order of the agenda, Mr. Weiss?
No changes.
No changes, okay. Report from closed sessions. There was no closed session, so there's nothing to report on that. Council, the communication or announcements. Anybody have anything to report on? Announcements? No? Okay. We're on item 5 already. We're moving. Okay. Number 5 is public comment. This is for items that are not on this evening's agenda. We always offer this to the public if anybody wants to speak. A couple minutes on any topic, again, that's not on this evening's agenda would be welcome to do so now. Do we have any speakers? Public comment? Pat? And then followed by right here, the second row. Okay.
Every time I hear the city talk about newspaper racks, it sounds like the city is proud that they've removed so many in the last year. I think that's really sad. I think we need more newspaper racks. We need them in the neighborhoods where people live. I think an informed citizenry is essential. And I think if you had an informed citizenry, you wouldn't be heading into your second 4-hour meeting on the subject that is on the agenda.
Great. Thank you very much. Please come on up. If you could identify yourself, your name, and welcome.
Thank you. The seniors signed a petition rejecting any fee or tax for membership to the senior center. We paid taxes for many years and know the senior center is without a mortgage. We're retired on fixed incomes. You have to pay for our own medical care and dental care, with costs rising every year. The senior center should be open to all seniors, regardless of income.
Okay, pardon me, if I
Keep
could.
the seniors out of nursing homes. Also, the seniors reject having the tiny tots here. They're not socialized, have poor hygiene, and it could spread disease to the seniors, compromising their health. I speak as a retired teacher of young children with 30 years of experience. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Would anybody else like to, if you could hold your applause, please. Anybody else like to speak on any item not on the agenda this evening? Okay. Thank you. Okay, item number 6 is the approval of the consent calendar. The consent calendar items considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There's no separate discussion on these items unless members of the council, staff, or public request specific items to remove for separate action. With that,
G and J. Hold G and J.
Mr. Grocott?
G and J.
J, and what was the first one?
G.
G?
Can't hear you.
G and J.
J.
Okay.
That's right.
So there's a request to remove G and J. Mr. Grocott?
That's it.
Thank you. Anything else?
Mr. Mayor, just as a point of information, could the city manager speak to items H and I? I just wanted to get clarification on what they were.
Items H and I are suspensions of labor agreements that we've had with the management and the confidential groups. They were 3-year agreements. The third year would have called for 2.75% base increase in salary. The labor groups, management and confidential employees have agreed to suspend that contract and forego that salary increase. And so that'll be reflected in a $120,000 plus or minus budget savings for the year moving forward. And you'll see it as a budget cut in our budget package.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, move approval of consent calendar items 6A through F, H, and I.
Second.
Okay. Can we have roll call now?
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes. So just for the public to know, we will be at the end of the meeting going back to G and J and discussing those items. Okay, item 7, reports to council. Mr. Weiss?
We have no additional reports.
Okay. I guess we're here to talk about number 8 because we moved through the first 7 pretty quickly. Okay, this is a study session. This is for our fiscal year budget for our fiscal year 2010 starting July 1st and ending June 30th of 2011. With that item, let me just give you a couple-minute introduction. And just to let the public know what we're planning to do. I probably won't be able to judge timing, but I can tell you what we plan to do this evening. I have this evening's meeting broken up into 4 sections. We'll have staff, mainly our city manager, Mark Weiss, and I believe Jeff Malty may be also talking. It'll basically be a staff report. This, again, is a continued meeting from our March 13th meeting we had about a week and a half ago on a Saturday from 12 o'clock till 5 o'clock on the budget. So there'll be some updates that Mr. Weiss will be providing, a little bit of an overview, get people caught up, and some updates from that meeting that we had a week and a half ago. Second on the agenda is council will be allowed to ask questions, clarifying questions that they have on the various items. And we will do that in order of topic. So the topics are, of course, the big topics are, of course, are contracting for the police, contracting for fire, contracting for park and rec maintenance, parking meters, and then the last item is our 20% reduction program and any other items and topics that we'll want to ask staff questions about. So again, hopefully you as the audience, of course, will be interested in this, and we want to make sure we have all the facts. We have a staff report. We spent about 3 hours on that Saturday with staff reports. This is our chance to make sure we understand, we clarify, all the data is there for us to be able to proceed. Third on the agenda is public comment. This is where we encourage and want to hear from the citizens of San Carlos. It's a 2-minute limit. We need to, get through the evening, so try to be as concise as possible. But we do welcome, if everybody wants in this room wants to talk, we're here to listen to you speak on the topic, the budget. And the fourth item then will be, it'll come back to council. There will be a discussion. We will not be approving the budget. We probably have another meeting or 2 to go. But what we will be doing is we will be giving staff clear direction on whether or not council wants to pursue those same items in the order that I talked about, the questions, whether or not we want to pursue contracting for police, contracting for fire, park and rec maintenance, parking meters, 20% reduction, or any other items that we want to talk about. So this is our chance to really send them back and do work or not do work on basically staff reports and analysis and reporting back to us as we proceed through creating the budget for this next year. So with that, I'll turn it over again, the 4 steps. Back to number 1, Mr. Mark Weiss, our city manager for the city of San Carlos. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. It's a pleasure to be here tonight to talk about the alternatives before the City Council with respect to this coming budget. I have to get really close here.
Great.
The 2 paths that we've talked about, one includes...
Can you hear? Can everybody hear? No. Okay, up a little bit more, then closer.
Maybe we get a volume higher.
Yeah.
We apologize. This is a kind of a special. We usually are in city council, so these microphones are kind of set up for the evening. So go ahead, Mark.
Okay. Are we good now?
Now you're
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Again, we're here to discuss budget options. There are 2 different paths that we've represented in the budget documents before you. The first path, the regional outsourcing alternative, is where we would look to neighboring communities, either the cities that surround us or the state of California for fire, or the county sheriff for police, perhaps privatization for parks maintenance, and then also parking meters. By choosing those options, the staff, as discussed at the Saturday meeting, believe that savings can be realized in the neighborhood of $3.5 to $6 million per year. The document before you tonight, as we discussed last Saturday, has been altered a little bit in terms of this path. And the reason for that is that to realize that full $3.5 to $6 million will take a period of months, if not years, because fire, for example, we're part of a joint powers agreement that requires an 18-month notice before significant savings might be realized through this alternative model. Accordingly, what we've done in the alternative before you, and it's included as attachment A within the staff report, is to provide an alternative that is a bit of a hybrid between options A and B. We've suggested that we would outsource regionalized police more quickly because that is wholly within our control. And we've estimated within a package about a $2 million savings in the next fiscal year with that particular alternative. The suggestion would be that we would continue to pursue regionalization for fire, but we're not projecting any savings in the next fiscal year due to that action. There are steps that would be taken. You would give notice to the Belmont San Carlos Fire Department, for example, and you would go to work to implement those options, discuss alternatives, distribute assets, determine what liabilities might be. Parks maintenance, we've altered the recommendation a little bit here, and the reason for that, again, it would be to suggest a transition period. As you will recall, it's still represented in option B, but last week we talked about outsourcing or privatizing parks maintenance. There are 6 positions in that division, and the outsourcing would require that those 6 positions be cut, that at least 3 to 4 of those positions would be laid off, that real people are in those positions, they would lose their jobs. We also have a program change in this budget document that is a new sewer maintenance program, which we discussed in some detail at the last meeting. There is an opportunity to move a couple of those employees into the parks or into the sewer maintenance program. And so by adopting a transition plan, what we're suggesting is that we could cut 3 positions, backfill with a small contract for private services, and then work towards a transition through attrition, retirements, and the like over the next year. So the goal would still be the same. We would do it via a transition plan as opposed to doing it all in one fell swoop to avoid the layoff scenario. And it would provide for a smoother transition in the maintenance opportunities as well. And then the parking meters, again, we're not showing any revenue in this budget package, but we are showing it as being something that we're still recommending that we would pursue. We are about to enter into a contract for analysis of parking meter options and alternatives. Depending upon the direction that we might receive tonight, that could affect whether or not we actually pursue that contract or award that contract or not. The second alternative is a 20% cut list. That is attachment B. It's also included within your packet, and we can get into the detail if the council chooses later on this evening. The time is of the essence in terms of pursuing these options. We don't want to rush. We want to do this activity in a thorough manner, but at the same time we must realize that there are consequences for deferring, delaying, and not taking any action whatsoever. We've been formally pursuing the outsourcing regionalization process since December. We've actually been talking with the managers in neighboring communities for much longer than that, and we actually have many success stories in terms of where we have implemented regionalization within the Bay Area. Not so much in the public safety realm, however. But in December, this council authorized staff to pursue regional service opportunities for police and fire. So it's been on the table, and it's been affecting the organization as you might expect. There's a lot of a nervous energy. There's a lot of uncertainty within the organization, and I think you're starting to see it manifest and affect the organization's health as a whole. In addition, there obviously are the dollars per day. We talked last time about the total effect being up to $10,000 per day in terms of savings that might be realized with an alternative service model. And fourthly, I would list up there that there is a point in time right now where if we are able to move in short order with the sheriff, they are proposing to take all of the employees within the police department and bring them on board in the county sheriff's department. So jobs would be transferred simply. The employees would all still have jobs. There wouldn't be a need for layoffs of the full-time positions. That opportunity may not be there 6 months from now, a year from now. If the sheriff moves forward with another community, those vacancies are occupied by other positions, or if other budget adjustments are made at the county level, those vacancies may not be there. We certainly could still have discussions in terms of contracting with neighboring cities and or even the sheriff, but the opportunity actually to do that so smoothly with employment opportunities for all of our existing employees may not be there long term. And so for all of those reasons, we think that we ought to move forward with this in an expeditious manner. As you know, we received a letter a week ago Friday from the City of Redwood City indicating that there was interest in Redwood City perhaps for providing police services on our behalf on a contractual basis, similar to what the county sheriff had proposed. We had started, as I mentioned earlier, talking with neighboring cities. Lukewarm responses, Redwood City probably being the warmest even initially, but not having any proposal in hand, we turned to the county sheriff and to the state in fire and solicited their interest in providing contractual services. And both of those entities responded in a forthright and very quick manner. And we actually had the proposals that were provided to this council in the last week. Subsequently, this very last week, again on Friday, I met with the city manager from Redwood City. The interest is still there in terms of providing us with a proposal. They're simply not as far along as what the county is. There's a need to meet with command staff in Redwood City. There's a need to meet with the city council. They're making budget decisions at the same time as we are. And so the indication was that if we would like a proposal from Redwood City, that they would consider providing that, but that they would need 30 days or so in order to make that kind of a proposal, similar to what the sheriff has given us already available to us. The point there being that the decision or the direction given tonight doesn't necessarily need to be outsourcing regionalization with the sheriff, but rather it can be the concept of outsourcing with either the sheriff or a neighboring city. Those options are still alive and well. And what I can say is that the initial review of the City of Redwood City would indicate that there are similar savings through a contract relationship with Redwood City with similar staffing levels in their estimation based upon their first and initial cursory review. It verifies what we've been finding with our discussions with the county sheriff. The one challenge I think that will be greater with the City of Redwood City will be finding jobs for the employees that we currently have on board. They simply aren't as large of an organization. They don't have the vacancies and would not be able to provide, in my estimation, a landing spot for all of our employees at the current time. Now, there may be things that happen over the next few weeks or months that could alter that to some degree, but I'm not as optimistic there that all of our employees could be accounted for and provided positions under the Redwood City option. I do believe, though, it is something that we should keep our minds open to as we see how they pencil it out moving forward. Tonight, we're not looking for a formal motion. There's a lot of work to be done yet on putting together a budget package, depending upon the general direction that the City Council provides for us tonight. We would like to have your take on whether or not we should pursue the outsource option or whether we should do the more traditional reductions, alternative path B, the 20% cut option. We have those packages, those lists within your staff report, so either alternative is available to you to review. As in past years, we can go through those program by program by program and determine whether or not there's support or not for maintaining or cutting those programs. We would suggest that we do that, but I think first and foremost, we would like to get the council's take on whether or not this outsourced regionalization option is something that you're serious about, that you want us to seriously pursue. If you choose to do that, there are, like I say, a whole series of steps that need to be taken. We would sit down and meet and confer. We've actually begun. We've made overtures to the affected bargaining units. We've actually had a couple of meetings. The Police Officers Association is one that we're anxious to meet with. We've extended both by phone and now by letter invitations to meet to talk about the options that are available to us. I know that there are a lot of questions. You'll see in the packet some of the questions and concerns that have been raised in the police department. We take those seriously. We want to address those in a forthright manner. And so we look forward to the opportunity to meet with them at their earliest convenience. In addition to that, there will be a number of supporting documents that need to be addressed. Certainly, if we end up going with the outsourcing regionalization approach, we'll need to have agreements. We'll be working on contract proposals. In addition to the general proposals that you've seen, we would then actually begin working on a contract proposal with the county sheriff and with Redwood City if they want to pursue this alternative. The idea being that we bring those agreements back as quickly as we could, but in sync with budget adoption consideration. Perhaps in May. It may take us a little longer this year because of the complications that could arise, but May or June of this year. Our goal would be to have all of these documents in place prior to July 1st, which is the beginning of the fiscal year. We also need to determine the process that we'll go through with parks maintenance, again, either with a full-blown outsourcing of that alternative or some combination, such as what I'm proposing in alternative 1. And then we'll need to decide on the fire JPA as to whether or not, again, we're not asking for any formal action tonight, but one thing you could tell us to do is to bring back consideration for a formal notice at a subsequent meeting, perhaps in April or May of this year. You could ask us to bring back the documents necessary for you to consider providing that notice or taking that action with the Belmont San Carlos Fire Department. Now, I know that the kinds of things that we're talking about here are, it's a different way of doing business. It's different. We've talked in the past meeting about the fact that many other cities have already adopted this business model. It's not new and different throughout the state of California. It's a little different for San Mateo County. We actually, in talking with other managers, I would like to just relate one story where another manager indicated to me that they too were looking at changing the way that public safety was being provided in their community some years ago. And the suggestion was made to me that, like we have had in San Carlos, that when the idea surfaced and there was some talk about doing an RFP or an RFQ to change and consider at least changing the service provider, there was an uprising in the community. There was concern in the community that this wouldn't be in the best interest of that community. That manager was Susan George. Susan George is the town manager of Woodside. The service provider, the public safety provider in Woodside, is the county sheriff. It was when this was being considered before. It is today, because at the end of the day, they chose not to change service providers. The point there being that the town of Woodside is familiar with the public safety provider in their community. They've formed relations, they've formed a comfort level in terms of how public safety was provided, whether the president would come to visit or, town of Woodside has an interest in a very high level in terms of extraordinary public safety measures. And there was a comfort level there, just like there's a comfort level here, but a different business model in terms of how those services are being provided. And while we know that that this is a serious issue and something that needs to be studied thoroughly and with all due diligence, we know that it's something that makes the community nervous. We also know that change can occur, and that change does occur, and that change will occur. in this community, irrespective of whether or not we take Path 1 or Path 2. Because as we've talked about before, Path 2 will see further reductions this year, not only in Parks and Recreation, but also in public safety, in police and in fire. And we fully expect that under Path 2, you will be back next year and the subsequent years seeing additional reductions and cuts in those service areas. So the public safety model we have today is not going to be the public safety model we have a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, in any event. Change will occur. It's just a matter of whether or not we embrace that change and work collectively together to try to make it work in our best interest. With that, what I'd like to do is spend a little bit of time tonight, to 5 or 10 minutes, for Jeff to talk about the police option in particular. The reason for that is that we've had a lot of interest in that particular one. It's the one that provides the most savings. It's a $2 million line item in the Path 1 option. And there has been a lot of communication and dialogue in the community about the alternative service model and what it means, where the savings comes from. So we'd like to at least start there, spend a few minutes before we then entertain questions on all of the service opportunities.
Okay, just before Jeff gets started, I notice a few people might be standing outside. Are we broadcasting this in the chamber in 207?
In the council chambers for sure. I'm not sure about 207.
Okay, so any overflow, or if you just want a change of venue, feel free to go back and forth. And you can sit in our seats if you want. The council chamber is open. The broadcast is there. And there are also, there probably won't be many slides after about another 15 minutes. There are some comfortable carpet sitting seats on the floor here right behind us. Feel free to come up and sit and move around, make yourself at home. Okay, thank you. Mr. Maltby.
Good evening, Honorable Mayors, members of the City Council. Jeff Maltby, Administrative Services Director. Beginning in December 2009, the Council provided staff with direction to begin looking at some options on regionalization of municipal services. And while this approach is new in public safety, particularly police in San Mateo County, to a certain extent, it's not new at all to San Carlos in terms of providing critical services. Currently, water, sewer collection, garbage, all services that are considered quite critical to public health and safety are provided on a regional basis. So we began looking into this, and we wanted to set some initial goals for ourselves as we began talking to other cities and the county in particular. Our first goal was that, of course, it was imperative that whatever model we chose maintained public safety in this community. We also needed a model that would save money. We needed a model that would allow flexibility to the city to address and mitigate any impacts associated with that model. And we wanted a model that would allow us into the future to stop having to cut public safety services. We've been cutting in public safety in this community for over a decade. So we talked with other cities and the county and began to get some dialogue. The county was the first to actually provide us with a proposal. Based on what the county's provided, we believe that the savings to San Carlos would range approximately $2 to $3.5 million per year, depending on whatever final contract was put in place. These are simply initial proposals. The sheriff's proposal is not a hard and fast proposal. It's not a contract for you to approve and act on. It's simply a starting point to begin having the dialogue with the community to see what works and what doesn't. Mayor Royce at the last meeting made the comment that it's difficult, if not impossible, to analyze and compare apples for apples, this regional model being suggested by the Sheriff's Department with our current police department. They're different. There are pros and cons. I've been working with the Chief of Police to identify some of those pros and cons that are put into the staff report. Chief Rothis has been meeting with, I believe, the entire police department, sworn and non-sworn staff, to identify pros and cons and additional questions that staff might have. This is all work designed to move us forward. But before you tonight is a policy decision about whether or not to pursue this regional approach. before we begin to try to mitigate impacts of that approach, which we believe we can do, we want to know whether or not the council and the community are interested before we allocate our resources any further into the process. The report that was prepared for you this evening tried to look at the sheriff's proposals sort of component by component, looking at the management component, looking at the patrol component, the investigations component, communications, those types of things. And one of the areas that's gotten a lot of questions and comments is how can the sheriff's proposal suggest that we can replace 30 sworn personnel with essentially 14? And part of the answer to that question is the fact that what the sheriff is proposing is essentially a cost. They're basically selling you a schedule in patrol of services, and they're identifying that as a 3-in-1 schedule, 3 patrol officers, 1 sergeant. In the sergeant area, they're suggesting that you share with their existing sergeant. And again, the whole purpose of this regional approach is sharing. Well, this sharing of the sergeant clearly would save nearly $800,000 to $1 million a year, and it would increase the span of control of that sergeant from, I believe, 15 or 14 currently with the county to approximately 17 officers under 1 sergeant. Well, that's very different than what we have here in San Carlos, of about 3 to 4 to 5 officers under a sergeant at the daytime shift, which I understand from the chief is about the high. So we need to talk about the impacts and whether or not we feel there's anything we can do there. Again, we've identified significant savings so that we may have some resources to plug back in. In addition, since you're buying a schedule, a fixed schedule, the Sheriff's Department doesn't need to provide as many officers to provide that dedicated schedule. In other words, they're building in costs per officer to replace that officer if that officer is sick or that officer goes on vacation or is sent to training, all the things that happen with our officers right now. They've got the replacement built in, guaranteed. You can't get less than the 3-in-1 staffing as they're proposing in this agreement now, all guaranteed. Right now, for the city to be able to provide that, we have to have an extra pool of employees. And the analogy that I've used is imagine you have 2 baseball teams. And a baseball team has a 25-member roster, similar to the size of our police department. But the purpose of that baseball team is to field 9 players. If you can't field 9 players, you got a real problem. And so the sheriff is basically saying, we're going to guarantee you your 9 players, your starting lineup, and we're going to combine benches, and we'll utilize those combined shared resources to ensure that you always have 9 players going forward. And in fact, you have access to additional specialties, additional employees moving forward. There are certainly issues yet to be worked out, but the savings and the model itself seem to indicate that all of these can be overcome. Just in our neck of the woods, Woodside, Portola Valley, Los Altos Hills, Cupertino, Danville, Saratoga are all cities that have regional policing models with their sheriff's department. These are all safe cities. Public safety hasn't been impacted. Crimes are investigated. Response times have remained very high in those communities. And the communities report liking working and having those services provided by the Sheriff's Department. And in every instance, those services are more cost effective than our ability to provide municipal police services in the city. The detectives, the investigations portion, the county has a much larger. We have 3 detectives and 1 detective sergeant in the city. The county has over 40 dedicated personnel in investigations in various specialties: property crimes, high-tech crimes, vehicle crimes, gang, drugs, you name it. They've got a special investigative unit within their larger detectives group to do that. What they're saying in their proposal is they believe they have to add 1 person. The city of San Carlos has to pay for an additional 1 person adding to the size of their unit, and they will be able to continue investigating all the types of crimes that the city currently investigates now. The chief has provided them initially with all the data on the types of crimes that are being committed and investigated here in San Carlos, and that is what their proposal is based on. In addition, there are a number of sub-proposals proposed by the county, including continuation of our canine program. We have 2 canine dogs in the city. They'd like to bring those resources over to the county and continue to provide them to this community. They have a rather large volunteer base in the Sheriff's Department and reserve officer base that they'll be able to utilize here in San Carlos for special events like Hometown Days, Art and Wine Festival, Hot Harvest Nights, those kinds of things. They have a DARE program and a Sheriff's Athletic League program similar to our PAL program, all of which have been cut in this city in the past. So those are areas of services that are actually possibly going to be enhanced moving forward. There's certainly flexibility in having a contract approach. The sheriff has indicated a willingness to work with us to increase or decrease services, particularly in the first few years, understanding that this is going to be a new model for the sheriff and for us in San Carlos, and we want to work together and have a very cooperative partnership, a model partnership for this county. If we're going to do this, we ought to be very committed to doing it better than it's been done in the past and as good as it can be done. I think one aspect of this contract that shouldn't, this regional contract approach that shouldn't be overlooked is that it guarantees service levels now and in the future. It guarantees prices now and in the future. It allows you to do long-term financial planning on one of the largest cost components of the general fund budget so that it's predictable, manageable, and sustainable for this city at the current level that's being proposed, and perhaps even adding back in the future as additional financial resources become available in the city. San Carlos is not the only city that's looking at this right now. Millbrae and San Bruno are talking about a consolidation. City of San Mateo and Burlingame are talking about consolidations. San Carlos is talking about a consolidation with the Sheriff's Department, who happens to be their headquarters right next door to us, and the city of Redwood City, a city that's contiguous with us. We're not reinventing the wheel here. Looking at the cities that are doing this, they're safe cities that are very satisfied with the service and the price of that particular service. Next steps moving forward, if the council wanted staff to continue on, would be to basically focus our efforts in 3 areas. Putting together the budget based on this particular approach would be one. Meeting and conferring with our existing employee groups that would be affected on the decision to go to a regional consolidated approach would be another. And then thirdly would be working with the county and possibly Redwood City on the specific issues and implications of what a contract would look like and trying to mitigate to the best of our ability any of the impacts. Be happy to answer any questions you might have.
So with that, staff is open to take any questions that the council might have, option 1, or as you indicated, also option 2.
Okay. Thank you very much for that report. Okay, what I'd like then to do, the direction for City Council before public comment, which is third. City Council will be asking questions. And just to kind of keep us in the same topic, I've kind of organized it by category or topic. So again, I have 5 areas. Contracting with police. We'll go through and ask all those questions. So we see our police chief is here, joined us on the front row here to help us with that. Then we'll be moving on the fire, park and rec maintenance, parking meters, and 20% program reduction, or any other questions that council may have. So with that, anybody like to go first? Any questions? Mr. Grocott.
The first question I have actually if you will, Mr. Mayor, has to do with a comment by the city manager regarding our tracking here, and that is, it's been repeated by staff and by the city manager that this is Path 1 or Path 2, and I wanted to just get a word from him on the option to the council of combining Path 1 and Path 2, if that would be all right for starters.
Sure. I think, even that's police, I think it's a big enough question to go first, Sheriff. That'd be great. Mr. Weiss?
Actually, we did a little bit of that ourselves with the transition plan. If you see the new Path 1 that includes the transition plan, it's a combination. It takes the $2 million in savings from the outsourcing and combines it with $1.5 million of other alterations, either revenue enhancements, new programs, and or cuts. So yes, we've already done that with the first path. We would expect the council to have the opportunity to do that as well.
Okay, very good. I don't have a lot of questions regarding police because I actually sent a letter to the city manager with quite a few questions, and those have shown up. The answers to those have shown up in this report. The one question I do have reflects a concern, and perhaps somebody could speak to this. The examples that you give of cities that have contracted with the Sheriff's Department or looked at it are all rural in nature, Woodside and Portola Valley, namely. And particularly with this Sheriff's Department, I know you give other examples of Sheriff's Departments in other parts of the state, but I only know the one here. And my concern, and if you could comment on it, is that they do their work in a rural area, and I've talked to some police and some sheriff, and it does seem that, to me, the nature of their work is different. The type of calls, the training, and what they're expected to do, and so forth. So if somebody could comment to that, I would appreciate it.
I guess I'll start, and then perhaps the chief can chime in. But one of the thoughts there is that there are unincorporated areas in the counties that are contiguous to and almost part of the urban communities that already exist. So there is some experience along that line. But I mean, I think there is a bit of a change here in terms of the urban policing model that the sheriff would be embarking upon. At the same time, under the model that we're currently working with, the employees that would be implementing that plan would be employees of the city of San Carlos that are currently doing that model on our behalf. So the transition, I think, we've got a real opportunity to make that as smooth as possible. I don't know, Chief, if you'd like to.
No, I think Councilmember Grocott makes a good point with respect to his observations on what the Sheriff's Office is currently doing. They do basically police some of the rural areas. They have provided police assistance for both patrol and investigations in the city of East Palo Alto. But the Sheriff's Office responds to basically every type of call that we have here in San Carlos, whether it's domestic violence, robbery, burglary, or other incidents. They have people who would respond to those. It is a different animal to police this community. This is, again, they're used to municipal police services, and they're being policed by people who have done that for years. So I think it's fair to say that this is somewhat new for the sheriff in terms of coming in and setting up a new model under which it would be the San Carlos Bureau of the Sheriff's Office. I don't think that's something that they have done before. So this would be something that's new to them. What we have seen, though, is an enthusiasm on their part to be willing to go down this road. I think what I've been impressed with is their desire to sit and talk with us and to allow us to help shape the model. That's been impressive. But this would be something new for the Sheriff's Office in terms of not policing. They've done everything that we do. But this model would be new for them.
Thank you.
Anything else? Mr. Casella?
I don't have any questions at this time, Mr. Mayor. I may have after I hear some other comments, but I did have questions that were answered in the staff report.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, one of the thanks for the pink or purple sheet. Being colorblind is a bummer. Pink? Thank you. It's a pink sheet. One of the things you put down as a weakness, and I'm curious to get some clarification, was computer systems differ from the Sheriff's Office. At this point, and this may be a question for Mr. Weiss, who is providing the back office support for our police systems today?
Well, we have support for our records from our own staff, from our records management staff. We also have support from our IT staff, who's providing that, and from our police staff. So we're doing that ourselves. And then with respect to communications and dispatch function, that's being provided by Menlo Park staff in terms of their support for our computer-aided dispatch systems.
Great. Let me just zoom in on that for a moment. When you said the IT staff, is that the general city IT staff, or does the police have its own IT staff?
We pay for some contract hours for IT staff, and we also use the city's IT staff.
Great. Past that, the report is thorough at this point. Mr. Mayor, I don't have any further questions. I think everything else I would do would be more under discussion.
Mr. Klein?
I have a couple. First off, to our chief, I'm noticing in strength it says Sheriff's Office has well-trained professional staff. There's a lot of rumors going around the Sheriff's Office full of a bunch of fat guys who are all 65 years old. Could you speak to that about their professionalism, and do they do a really good job? Or
we are fortunate in this county. I think we have, maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I think we have one of the best sheriff's offices in the state. And partially as a result of the staff, partially where we're situated. We're situated in an area in the Silicon Valley. It's cutting edge. It's been, so the Sheriff's Office, San Mateo County Sheriff's Office, has kept up with that. They have a state-of-the-art forensics laboratory. They're involved in high-tech criminal investigations. They help provide leadership in narcotics investigations, and they help provide leadership in gang task force investigations. So, while I think I'm the most proud of our staff, I do think that the Sheriff's Office has professional staff as well.
Okay, and one other question for you, Chief. There's another thing of strengths where it says more promotional opportunities in the Sheriff's Office. Can you speak to that?
Well, there's hundreds of positions in the Sheriff's Office. They have ranks that for example, we don't have. And I think Jeff Maltby has some of the counts, but in terms of the number of sergeants, they also have a lieutenant rank that we don't have. They have captains, which is kind of equivalent to our commander, assistant sheriff, under sheriff. They have a variety of ranks, and within those rank structures, they have a variety of specialties within the rank structure. So you could be a lieutenant assigned to investigations. They also have a captain who's in charge of a regional high-intensity drug trafficking area. So the amount of specialties that they have and the amount of ranks within those specialties are quite a bit. And so our staff recognize that in terms of a strength of the Sheriff's Office, in terms of what they could provide for our staff, they provide a variety of specialty assignments and promotional opportunities.
Okay, thank you, Chief. This question might be more for our finance director or our city manager. We talk about 3-in-1 staffing here, and the sheriff is guaranteed at all times we will have 3-in-1 staffing?
That's correct.
What happens if something happens in one of their other jurisdictions? Do our guys bolt to go take care of that crime, or do they stay in town?
They would stay in town to the extent that would be normal now. I mean, our police officers right now, if there was an officer-involved shooting just over in Redwood City, the first responders are going to go just like they go now. So there's not going to be any difference, any additional departure of our police officers or deputies into other communities based on the sheriff's model.
Okay, and this is just an initial proposal that we will do some tweaking to?
That's correct.
Okay, and this will be more for discussion, so I can lay off of that now. That's it.
I did have one question, Chief. Under the communications, right now, Menlo Park, we contract with Menlo Park for our communications. Under this model, would that maintain? I was a little confused on the write-up, whether that would continue or it would be a different one.
That would continue because the sheriff's model doesn't include a mandatory dispatch component to it. There's been some initial kind of back-of-the-envelope calculations with respect to dispatch and what that might cost us. We are in a contract with Menlo Park right now to provide dispatch services through November 2011. So we're not focusing on that component at this particular time. We're focusing on the sheriff's proposal. And how it works with the sheriff's office is the sheriff is not in charge of dispatch services. They have a separate county communications bureau that is. Mm-hmm. So the sheriff really is not a mandatory part of the component of the proposal at all.
Okay, so we'll just continue on. It would continue on with what we have at least through November 2011, and then we would address it a little bit before that time, how we want to do it. If we took the proposal from the county?
Well, right now, like I said, we're in a contract with Menlo Park, and what we want to have done is have the city attorney review that portion of it. But quite honestly, we're really not at that point. We're more involved with the sheriff's proposal itself. So
Okay.
there may be options for county communications, but what we need to do is in my view, is adhere to our contract and our
Right.
commitments.
And that, in other words, the contract will stay in place no matter what we decide to do on this, is what I guess my
Correct.
question is. Thank you.
Mr. Royce?
Yeah.
Mr. Royce?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Griffin.
I did think of an additional question, if you don't mind.
I'm sorry. You were speaking there. The sound was coming there.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Chief, do you know anything about the staffing of the jail facility and the sheriff's officers? Do they rotate in, or do they choose that? The reason I ask the question is the concern of having our department and our officers either being required or cajoled into being going to the facility there and policing there. We don't have that kind of thing in our department.
No, we don't. And I'm not too aware of it. I think actually both happens. I think sometimes people request it, and sometimes they're transferred to the jail and to work in the jail. Sometimes, again, at their own volition, and sometimes because they're just placed there rotationally. With respect to our officers' service in the jail in that facility and what specialty assignments that they might have within the sheriff's office if we do go over. A lot of that is going to be, I think, subject to meet and confer issues and being able to sit down with the POA and sit down with the sheriff and talk about it. I firmly believe that if we go over to the sheriff, I'm not going to just be bringing 30 sworn officers. I'm going to be bringing 30 officers who I think add a lot of value to that organization, and I hope that the sheriff recognizes that as well, and I think he will.
Thank you.
You have a few questions here. Of course, what we're talking about, whenever you look at service, you look at quality and cost. And so, we talk about, and the sheriff's offer talks about public safety levels. Jeff, you talked about guaranteed service level. And so a lot of those metrics, I know, like response rate, we really understand what that means, and we could really tie it to how many seconds it takes for an officer to respond on a 911 call. The chief, you did a town hall meeting a few weeks ago, and I was very impressed with quality of service, but a lot of things that you talked about, and I admire from our San Carlos police force, was how much follow-up after crime. You talked about clearance rates, about different levels of crime, 3 different levels, how we had anywhere from 3 times to 2 times the success in clearance rates, the number of arrests, a lot of this work that's done after. So when you review and going to review sheriff, when we define and give public, and you come to us to define what that quality service is, that level of service, will it include these types of things and many other things? I mean, how confident are you to respond to the people of San Carlos to say this is the quality you're receiving based on these items like this?
Well, we can measure police service in 2 areas. We can measure it quantitatively, and we can also measure it qualitatively. So with respect to the quantitative measurements, a lot of them are very common. You've seen them all and don't need to be a police expert to know what they are. It's crime rates, it's response times, it can be clearance rates, and cost efficiencies, and so those, and whether or not crime rates are increasing and decreasing and in what areas. So those are measures that are common, and we can use those in terms of assessing organizational performance. And then there's also the qualitative measures, and that has to do with, it's important in our business not only to make people safe, but it's also important to make people feel safe. And so the question is, we would want to ask, if we do go to the sheriff, is how do people feel about that a year after the fact, 2 years after the fact? Are they feeling safe? What do they feel about the quality of service that they're receiving? And some of those qualitative measures also come from our employees in terms of whether or not the employees themselves feel that they have an opportunity within the organization to contribute at high levels, and whether they're satisfied with that organization. So I can't predict what the metrics will be. I can just tell you that there are metrics.
Okay, good. Okay. Second question is maybe near and dear to several people in San Carlos are the citations people receive, either moving violations, parking citations. And it's a very small number. I know we have a very low number as a percentage compared to other cities, but we do have about $350,000 total in that category. Does the sheriff keep that, or do we get that? I just want to make sure they don't start having $1 million of citations and they're keeping it, basically, where I'm headed.
All the revenue associated with traffic tickets and fines and those kinds of things, as well as any grants that the city would be eligible for, all that revenue will stay with the city of San Carlos.
Okay. So your citations stay in San Carlos. That's really good news. Thank you.
Feel good about that.
And my last question is, and it's just a clarification again, this is for Mr. Weiss. I asked a question about performance measures incorporating, again, maintaining quality, some kind of performance measures. There is a response here that performance measures will be part of measures, other safety metrics that can be incorporated in reporting tools. Let me just expand that a little bit more. I wasn't totally clear maybe at our last Saturday meeting. I know a lot of companies do what's called SLA service level agreements with whoever they're contracting out. And they're very strict. They get into a lot of performance measures and how you manage it and all those sorts of things. In fact, if you go into Wikipedia, there's a great definition. There's a lot of things that can be done in this service level agreements. And where I'm driving is, even though maybe we're outsourcing the service, I want to make sure the city of San Carlos still manages the quality and we manage the cost. I mean, we are the ones that paying for this service, and we need to manage that quality. I want to end by saying that it says here quality is also measured through customer satisfaction questionnaires, and I brought that up last time too, so that if we do proceed with this type, again, my question to go back to the sheriffs or Redwood City is to assure that we do have very good service agreements with them, and that customer surveying post after the implementation is a very, very important part of maintaining the quality in the city of San Carlos. So can you make sure we ask them that they're, again, agreeable that these service agreements and performance measures and customer surveys can be part of the agreement that we put together with them? Okay?
Sure, certainly. We can talk with them about that. I know we've made some communication and contact with them on those, as well as looking at other contracts. We really haven't found much in terms of other contracts that include that kind of quantitative or qualitative measure of performance. But we're still looking, and if there's some way to do that, we'd be happy to pursue it.
Sure, and that's what I expect. I wouldn't expect that they would, but I think it's really important that we change the tide here and we include something like that. Okay, thank you. So with that, any other questions on this topic? Okay, so going on to fire. Who would like to, any questions? Anybody?
What is he going to present? Is Mr. Moore going to present, or are we just going to ask questions?
No, just questions. Just questions. The presentation, most of the presentation was last time.
Actually, we do have two new items. If you'd like to see them at the data that was requested by Mr. Ahmad, Mr. Klein, and also in response to the fire chief. So we have two additional data points if you wish to see them. Mm-hmm. We'll go to the last two slides. The previous slides you've seen before, and again, we can go back to those if you'd like. Keep going. Keep going. One more. Okay, this slide was something that was suggested by Fire Chief Fry. He indicated that the data that we presented to you on the 13th was comparing the value of the CAL FIRE proposals with the amount of money that the city of San Carlos was paying for fire. And he suggested that perhaps a more interesting comparison would be to compare the total budgets of the fire JPA with the four agencies that have CAL FIRE agreements. And that's what we've done. In fact, the last data point actually came in this afternoon, which is the reason this was not available for your packet. Essentially what this shows you is again, the annual budget for the 4 agencies and the Fire JPA. It compares the cost per company of these 4 agencies with the Fire JPA. The reason it's slightly different is, as some of you know, in the Fire JPA, the San Carlos and Belmont shares are calculated after revenue is deducted. The same is true with these other agencies. I think the thing that's interesting here is the relative magnitude of savings is still pretty comparable. The final column is what we call savings per company, and as you know, in San Carlos we pay for 2 companies. So what you see is the savings using that metric would be anywhere from $1.7 million per year at Coastside to $3.6 million per year at South Santa Clara. It's also interesting to note, similar to the data we showed you last time, that the first 3 agencies are long-standing agreements of 10 to 40 years, and so they do not have any so-called frozen or red-circled salaries. The 4th example, Coastside, which has less savings, only $1.7 million a year, does have red-circled salaries. The other significant difference, which I think addresses some of the questions we had from the council last time, is the Coastside number also includes things including OPEB, retiree medical costs. It also includes side fund costs and things like that. We had a very interesting discussion Friday with Coastside. Their operating budget is actually only $6.8 million. I've inflated that by another roughly $900,000 to include all the side fund stuff, just so you have a flavor of what that might look like. And then going to the other slide, this was also requested by the 2 fire commissioners, and this gives you a flavor for different opportunities in the fire area for savings. And I would highlight, as we note at the bottom, some of these savings relate to areas that you would explore as a council if you remain in the Fire JPA with Belmont. Others would be savings you would achieve if you were not in the Fire JPA. So the total amount of savings in these 4 categories is in excess of $5 million per year. However, you wouldn't achieve all of those because, again, it's a function of whether you're in or out of the Fire JPA. And just to go through some of the highlights, we talked last time about contracting with CAL FIRE would give you a savings, staff estimates, between $1.2 to $2 million per year. And we would note with the new benchmark at Coastside, we're showing a savings of $1.7 million per year, which is sort of towards the high end of that range, but still on target. We had a resident at the last hearing question why the staff was recommending the freezing of salaries or the red circle option. My experience, again, as I indicated last time, is that's normally something one does when you move from one model to another, but the resident is correct. The council is not under any requirement, and that's an additional $800,000 per year. We talked a bit about overlapping stations, and we've talked a bit to some of the neighboring agencies. And again, as I think Mr. Weiss indicated, most of them are 30 days behind us in terms of their budget cycle. But it probably will not surprise you to hear that, for example, the county is also exploring the question of overlapping stations this year. Staff estimates that if we were to address the overlapping station at Alameda, in San Carlos, and Cordilleras at CAL FIRE, there's a potential savings there of $1.6 million per year. And also at the station in Belmont, at Cipriani Tower in San Mateo, there's a savings of roughly $963,000 per year to San Carlos, or $2.2 million per year to both cities, since that's a 3-way station. Although obviously the Cipriani savings would only occur if you stayed in the Fire JPA. If you obviously left the Fire JPA, that's something the city of Belmont could pursue. So again, that's a kind of a menu, if you will, of the $5 million that's on the table in the fire arena. And again, a lot of that depends on whether you're in or out of the Fire JPA. So that's the additional information.
Thank you very much. Questions for Brian on fire? Mr. Grocott, please.
The issue of hazmat hasn't been discussed very much. Have you talked to the county about what would happen if we were to do all this? Hazmat would go away. What's the county's response?
Well, in 2005, we actually did talk to both the city managers group and the fire chiefs group about hazmat, and they asked us about whether or not